How are you guys? Don't forget to leave a review and enjoy the story. Enjoy watching. The story begins. MC combed his hair. He straightened his shirt. He looked at himself in the mirror and said, "Perfect." After all, starting today, he would begin his duties as a court blacksmith. He left the house. He thought about how much effort he had put into fulfilling his dream of becoming the best blacksmith in the world. He walked down the street with a smile on his face. Cherry blossom leaves were falling near the castle grounds. He noticed the tree and saw that the cherry blossoms were in full bloom. The petals seemed to be greeting him. He decided that he would do his best to prove himself worthy. On his way to the smithy, he noticed a girl. This lovely stranger was enjoying the cherry blossoms. She approaches the MC and asks if he's a blacksmith. Fake was stunned that she spoke to him. He noticed that she was very cute. He thinks that this girl might be an aristocrat. He smiles and replies that he is a blacksmith and asks how she knew. Alicia giggles. She pointed to his pocket, from which his blacksmith's license was sticking out. Fake noticed this and realized that he had almost lost it. Without this license, he would not be able to work. He thanked the young lady. Alicia replied that he was too young to be a blacksmith and asked how long he had been there. Fake stood at attention and declared that he would begin his duties today. Then he introduced himself. He noticed her surprised reaction and apologized, saying that he was just rehearsing. Alicia said that it was no big deal and that he was a very polite young man. She introduced herself as Alicia Burnist. Fake bowed and asked if she was an aristocrat. She answered in the affirmative, but said there was no need for formalities. They continued to stand under the falling cherry blossom petals. Fake asked how she ended up here. Alicia explained that she was supposed to attend the ball, but many suitors were seeking her attention, so she had to escape. She asked him what he wanted to be. MC asked her the same question. Alicia replied that she wasn't sure about herself and didn't know what her true desires were, but she really wanted to find out. Fake thought about what he really wanted and who he wanted to become. And at that moment, he said that he wanted to become the best blacksmith in the world. Alicia was surprised and asked, "The best in the world? Really?" MC replied yes. He understands that it will not be easy, but he will do his best. She looked at him with sincere, shining eyes, and she whispered that perhaps it would be so. Then she confirmed her words by saying that she hoped he would become the best blacksmith in the world. Fake smiled and replied, "Of course." He clearly did not expect such open support from her. Fake took his leave and remembered how people used to laugh at him when he talked about his desires and dreams. Besides, he thought Alicia was very nice. And now that he would be serving at court, he would probably meet many charming people. And maybe one day he would even get married. He approached the smithy doors and exhaled nervously. And he remembered that first impressions are very important. He opened the door and shouted, "Good morning." At that very moment, he received a strong blow to the face. A bearded man threatened him with his fist and said, "Come on, get to work." He grabbed him by the shirt and ordered him to get to work immediately. Morgan gave him his first task, to restore his sword, and told him not to dare leave until he was finished. And so, the colorful life at court that he had imagined for himself was practically destroyed. And so began his personal hell. 3 years have passed since he took up his duties as a court blacksmith. His main responsibility was to restore weapons. He used to be a blacksmith in a village, but his talent was soon noticed, and that's how he ended up at court. Fake was full of hope to improve his craft in the place of his dreams. But the reality turned out to be completely different. The owner of the forge, Mr. Morgan, constantly yelled at him, telling Fake not to slow down in performing his duties. MC only had the courage to apologize to him. Morgan did not accept his apologies, saying that they were useless and that Fake was a failure, and that he would deduct this mistake from his monthly salary. Morgan asked if there were any problems. Fake replied that there were none and that he did not dare to argue. MC said that usually an entire workshop worked with such a large amount of ammunition, but now everything had been placed on his shoulders alone. And once again, he is being punished for a fabricated altercation with a colleague. Morgan hits MC in the face again. He declares that he will try to teach him some sense. Fake has been in this forge for 3 years, and people are constantly angry with him, but he has grown accustomed to the pain. He believes that his colleagues are right and that he is not yet ready to join the workshop. He still lacks the necessary skills. That is why they're dissatisfied with him and constantly beat him. That's why his salary is lower and he has no days off. But MC believes that it's all his fault. He is to blame for this and is untalented. Morgan approached him with a smile and asked if Fake had thought about his behavior. If so, he asked him to get up and said that all weapons must be ready for the holidays. MC said he understood everything. Morgan replied that he and his colleagues had been invited to the ball, which is why Fake should not slack off and must do his job properly. His colleagues were leaving. One of them smiled and said that they hadn't visited the lovely Alicia in a long time. Then he shared the news that guests from a neighboring state would be joining them at the feast. It was necessary to greet the lady properly. Fake listened to all this silently and sadly. Then he closed the doors of the forge and went to work. He saw that he had a lot of work to do and realized that if he didn't finish by the end of the week, he would have to work night shifts. Tomorrow and the day after tomorrow were supposed to be his days off, and it would be nice to take a little break. But first, he needed to finish the weapons so he could deliver them to the knights. So he would have to put off his rest. And even if he finished by Monday, it would already be a new work week. He needed at least one day off because he couldn't go on like this. MC thought that if he weren't so untalented, he would have finished much earlier. He applied a magical inlay to another weapon, and he explained that blacksmiths have two main responsibilities. The first is to make weapons, and the second is to cast spells. Enchantment increases the sharpness and durability of the sword. Thanks to this, the sword does not require additional maintenance and does not rust, which is also a magical effect. But the enchantment lasts about a week. Therefore, every week, many weapons are brought to the smithy. Enchanting is not a complicated process. First, you need to familiarize yourself with the contents of the weapon's magic code. To do this, open a special system window. Corrections are made using magical power. Enchanting is done by changing or adding magical symbols. If you handle the weapon carelessly or do not restore it for too long, the symbols will wear off. If the spells on the sword are still intact, all you need to do is renew them. If they have completely disappeared, you'll need to reapply them. He made a small number, exhaled, made a few more, and exhaled again. Then he moved on to the next sword. But his eyes closed, he smelled a pleasant aroma and felt something soft and warm. A woman's hand rested on his forehead. He didn't understand what was happening. Had he fallen asleep? MC jumped up with the words, "What bad luck. Now he won't be able to finish the job," and accidentally hit Lady Alicia standing above him. She grabbed her head and said it hurt. Fake was surprised to see her there. He bowed and said he was very sorry. Alicia replied that he shouldn't apologize. MC said he had been disrespectful to the Duchess. Alicia was embarrassed and said no. Fake wondered why Lady Alicia was interested in blacksmithing, because every time she received an invitation to the ball, she came to the smithy. And just yesterday, Mr. Morgan had discussed with the others that Alicia had also been invited. MC thought about how he hadn't even changed his clothes, but remained in his work clothes and hadn't taken a bath. Alicia asked what had happened. She said that if he slept on the floor, he would catch a cold. Then she asked if everything was all right. Fake replied that he was fine. But what worried him most was that it was already morning and the ball was over. Most likely, Alicia had stayed overnight and decided to stop by the forge before leaving. But he remembered that he was supposed to finish his work yesterday, and it seemed to him that he had done everything that was required. Alicia looked at him and said he looked pale. She asked if he was feeling well and inquired about his health. Then she touched the abrasion on his face. Fake cried out in pain and said that everything was fine. And then he thought about how Mr. Morgan's blows usually didn't leave any bruises, and his behavior yesterday must have upset him. He thought about how nothing good awaited him. Alicia looked at MC with sympathy. She knows he is being mocked, but he did not want to admit it. After all, he liked her, even though he understood that he was not good enough for her. He couldn't win her over even if he tried his hardest. But at the same time, he wanted to look good in her eyes, and he didn't want her to see him looking so pathetic. MC wanted to make a good impression on her as a man. Alicia asked if he was in pain. She regretted not having any healing ointment. Fake asked her not to worry about it. He apologized and said he still had a lot of work to do and didn't have time to offer her tea. Alicia replied that he shouldn't worry about it and asked to watch him work. Fake replied that he didn't mind. He put the sword on the table and began to enchant it. MC noticed that the sword was missing a symbol, and then the marks on the sword disappeared. Alicia watched his work closely, then approached and said that he was very skilled and meticulous in his craft. Fake asked if she really thought so. The Duchess noticed a lot of weapons and asked if he had enchanted them all himself. She then assumed that this was the case. She said that it must not be easy and asked if all blacksmiths worked that way. Fake replied that they did, because he was at the lowest level, and if he couldn't even handle that, he could forget about his dream of becoming the best craftsman. Alicia was surprised and replied that she didn't know that the path of a blacksmith was so thorny, and his work clearly deserves respect, as befits a court armorer. MC replied sadly that there was nothing special about it because he still lacked experience. At that moment, Alicia took his hand. She said that he was an extremely remarkable person because he was capable of doing so much on his own. Fake replied that this was not the case. After all, according to others, he was just a mediocre talent. He understood that he had to keep up appearances in front of Alicia. But tears began to roll down his cheeks. She said his name, and Fake asked what was wrong. He covered his face with his hand, wiping away his tears, and said that everything was fine. Alicia asked him to tell her what had happened. She hugged him tightly and asked him to share it with her. And if he didn't tell her, she wouldn't let him go. MC said that they weren't tears of grief, he was just washing his eyes. Alicia objected, saying that most people don't cry at all. Fake said that blacksmiths are just skilled in water magic. She looked him straight in the eyes and shouted again, asking him to tell her what had happened. He was ashamed, but he still told her what had happened. Once he started, he couldn't stop, even though he had never shared this with anyone before. But Lady Alicia is the daughter of a duke. Does he have the right to behave like this in her presence? Is it acceptable? He justified his colleagues by saying that it was his own fault because he had no talent. They were just trying to teach him. Alicia reassured him, saying that it was all nonsense. Alicia apologized, saying she should have asked about it earlier. She put her hand on his head. Fake felt the warmth of her palm. A tear began to roll down his cheek. He said he should apologize because he had talked too much. MC realized that tears were flowing again, and he didn't want her to see him looking so pathetic. At that moment, Argos burst into the forge and shouted, "You talentless hack, quickly enchant the sword." Alicia was surprised by his appearance and called him by name. Argos was taken aback by the situation. Alicia said that Argos's work would be blessed. Argos scratched the back of his head, came closer, and said that he didn't know Alicia was in the smithy. Fake understood that under normal circumstances, he would have been beaten up, but this time it was different. He assumed it was all because of the Duchess. Argos asked again to enchant the sword, but this time more respectfully. Fake apologized and replied, of course. He took the sword in his hands and read its code, from which he understood that the sword had been used very recklessly. After all, he had cast a spell on it just a couple of days ago, but it was almost destroyed. Fake asked Mr. Argos to be more careful in the future. After all, the spell was significantly damaged. Argos clicked his tongue and declared that it was all the fault of the incompetent Fake, since he was the one who had cast the spell on the sword. Alicia watched his speech with interest. He apologized and asked to cast a stronger spell. Fake replied that she had cast a powerful enough spell, but the material used to make simple knight swords was not of the best quality. Because of this, the spell's power was limited, and if he got carried away in battle, the magical structure would be broken. Argos clicked his tongue again, not wanting to listen to all this boring stuff. MC announced that the restoration of the sword was complete. The sword was in good condition and ready for use. Argos took it and examined it carefully. Then he headed for the exit, but before leaving the forge, he turned to Alicia. He suggested that she accompany him on a stroll to show her the palace surroundings. Alicia thanked him and replied that she had to decline, wishing him all the best. Argos then asked to take his leave. Alicia asked MC how often he encountered such behavior. Fake hesitated and thought about how he was once again pathetic and unable to maintain his dignity in the presence of a girl he liked. The Duchess asked him not to stress so much, otherwise he would ruin his health. Fake sadly stated that if he couldn't handle the work at court, he wouldn't be able to work anywhere else. Alicia asked why. MC explained that in that case, he would lose his license. To be honest, he had already tried to leave after working for a year. He told Mr. Morgan that he couldn't do it anymore and asked to be dismissed. But Mr. Morgan threatened that in that case, he would revoke his blacksmith's license. And without a license, he would not be able to practice his craft. Even if he continued to work secretly, if he was discovered, he could be arrested for illegal activity. Alicia took his hands. She said she had come to him for a reason and wanted to make him an offer. She said, well, with some embarrassment. And then she asked why they shouldn't get married. Fake was surprised by these words. He thought he must have misheard. He assumed that the Duchess simply meant something else by the word marriage. Alicia said, marry again. Fake exclaimed, marriage? Is that what he thinks it means? When a man and a woman live together. Alicia pressed his hands to her chest, clearly expressing her agreement with these words. But MC still didn't understand what was going on. Fake asked, marriage? Alicia said that he had understood her in that sense, and that she didn't mean anything like that. She explained that many suitors were trying to win her hand in marriage, but she didn't want to marry any of them, so she needed MC as a cover. Alicia said that he was a blacksmith, just like her father. That's why she would be able to convince him. Convince whom? Asked MC. He wanted to know what she meant. The Duchess told him that her family were blacksmiths, and her ancestors had presented the king with a sword, which is now considered a national treasure, and in return her family had been given a title. Her father had worked hard to advance his career and become an aristocrat. Fake was surprised by this information and asked what it had to do with him. Alicia replied that there must always be a blacksmith in her family. One of the family members must have a talent for blacksmithing in their blood. MC realized that it was not about blood at all. After all, if innate talent was inherited, she could marry whomever she wanted. Alicia replied that this was exactly what she meant and asked if he would be her fiancé. Fake was confused. Alicia asked him again. After all, there were so many suitors around her, and she was tired of their attention. She wanted to get married when she met the man she truly loved. But until then, She wanted MC to pretend to be her fiancé. For her, it was a necessary measure to scare off the others. Besides, if he went to her homeland with her, she would make sure he got a new license, and then no one would be able to torment him anymore. She thought it was a win-win situation for both of them. She asked why he wouldn't accept it. Fake smiled and asked if the blacksmith's talent was the main requirement. Then he said that he lacked talent and therefore could not help. Alicia objected, saying that this was not true. After all, she had seen him at work and always thought that he was the most talented blacksmith in the area. And it wasn't just his talent, but also his diligence and hard work. That was what she liked about him. She looked him in the eyes, took his hands, and asked again if he would be her fiancé. MC thought about how she had always been kind to him, how sweet and responsive she was. He tried to see her in that light, and was on the verge of misinterpreting everything. Fake asked her to explain what she thought a fake fiancé would be like. Alicia explained that she thought it would be better than marrying a stranger, and that's why she decided to become Fake's sister-in-law. She asked him not to say things like that anymore, because it confused her. MC realized that all he would get from the groom was his word. In reality, Alicia did not want such a relationship with him. But even so, she felt sorry for the man who had nowhere else to go, and that was why she chose him. Even if he was not destined to marry Lady Alicia, he had a chance to find happiness living with her as a blacksmith. He replied that he was ready to become her fiancé. Alicia grabbed him by the shoulders and asked if he was sure. MC replied yes. She explained that in that case, there would be another ball that evening, after which they would go to her residence. Fake clarified that it would be Monday morning. In that case, he would need to resign. He didn't know if he could leave so easily. He had been told that if he resigned, he would have to give 2 weeks' notice. The last time he brought this up, he was severely beaten. But this time he had Alicia, and they would figure something out. Alicia asked him not to call her lady. Fake asked why. She explained that now he was her fiancé, and his status didn't matter. So she asked him to address her without titles from now on. MC scratched his head and agreed with this line of thinking. Alicia said that now he was no longer a stranger. Fake went to Mr. Morgan and said that he could no longer work and wanted to resign of his own accord. Morgan shouted, "What are you talking about? Have you forgotten how much effort has been put into you over the years?" One of his colleagues agreed with these words and asked who else, in his opinion, would tolerate such mediocrity. Another said that he had taught him etiquette, since Fake had not known how to behave at court before. A third asked where he would go in that case, and who would need him. After all, such a talentless person would not be able to support himself anywhere. MC stood there confused, thinking that before, it would never have occurred to him to object, and he would have simply remained silent. But now he had made a promise to Alicia and couldn't give up. He gathered his thoughts. He shouted once more that he wanted to resign because he could no longer cope with the work. Morgan asked what he would do when he left. Did he have another job lined up? Fake said yes. Morgan asked to see his license. MC replied, of course, took out his license and handed it to his boss. Morgan angrily tore the license to shreds. He tore it into small pieces. He said that MC was no longer a blacksmith and would not be able to work in this country. Then he asked where such a useless person would go now. And even if he hoped to get his license back, it was under their jurisdiction. And if he wanted it back, he would have to stay and work for them. Fake thought about how sick he was of this country, and what was the point of a license if it meant nothing? Morgan said that if Fake fulfilled his duties for another year, he would get a promotion and he would hire a new person. MC replied that he no longer worked for him and apologized. Morgan was outraged by these words. He shouted that Fake was useless. He reminded him that if he continued to do this illegally, he would be arrested. MC replied that it didn't matter. One of his colleagues said that if Fake left them, he would be completely alone and no one else would put up with a useless person like him. Another said that if Fake realized what he had done, he would come crawling back and continue working for them anyway. MC turned around and, hearing his colleagues say that they had practically accepted him into their union, headed for the exit. Fake realized that he never wanted to be here again. He walked out and slammed the door. He turned around and noticed Alicia. She asked if he was done. Fake replied yes. Then he wondered if she had heard the conversation. After all, if there was no soundproofing, she would have heard everything they said to him, and he really didn't want that. Morgan ran out of the office. He noticed Alicia and called out her name. He bowed and said that he hadn't seen her in a long time and complimented her, saying that she was becoming more and more charming every day. Alicia thanked him and asked if Fake had been fired. This question stunned Morgan, and he replied yes. Then he pointed at MC and said that it didn't matter anyway, because they had created the most favorable conditions for him, but he had neglected them and apparently hadn't learned anything. Alicia replied that she was extremely surprised by this fact, because she had given him a job at her residence, and then laughed loudly. Morgan and his former colleagues at Fake were extremely shocked by this information. Morgan asked what she meant. After all, MC couldn't even forge a sword properly, let alone cast spells. Alicia replied that, in her opinion, Fake was a very talented craftsman and asked if anyone had any objections to her taking him. Morgan replied that of course not, and then asked why she didn't choose someone like him. He bowed and asked again why she shouldn't hire him. Alicia laughed and replied that she wasn't interested. Morgan was stunned by the whole situation. Alicia turned around, smiled, and said that she and Fake could leave. They took each other's hands and headed for the palace exit. MC reflected on the fact that he was just a fake fiancé for Alicia. But every day, he fell more and more in love with her. And so he and Alicia left the Revan Empire and headed south to the kingdom of Narstea. Upon arrival, Alicia's father will be waiting for them at the Burnist family estate. A day's journey by stagecoach, and they are there. MC got out of the stagecoach and stretched. Alicia asked if he was tired. After all, it had been a long day. Fake replied that he wasn't tired at all, but even if he were, it would be nothing. After all, he worked without rest from dawn to dusk in the smithy. Alicia said that she had already notified her father and that he was waiting for them. Fake replied that was good and said that he was even a little excited. He took Alicia's hand. She pulled her hand away and cried out. Fake apologized and said that he thought it would be logical to do so. This is how Alicia responded. Then she said that everything was fine and she just didn't expect such a turn of events. Fake smiled and replied that he was really sorry because he had crossed the line. The engagement would be fake and he had gone too far. Alicia objected. Even though he caught her off guard, there was nothing wrong with that, so she asked him not to worry. Fake asked what she meant. He suggested that everything would look more natural if they improvised. Alicia nodded and replied that it would. They arrived at Mr. Burnist's estate. He sat in his royal robes and wondered if this was the blacksmith his daughter had mentioned. Alicia nodded and said that his talent was 1 in a million. She asked her father to watch him cast spells. Goral approached the sword rack and picked up a sword. He handed it to the MC and asked him to show how he enchanted swords. He gave him the task of renewing the spells cast on it. Fake replied that he would. He took the sword out of its sheath. He began to read its code and noticed that there were many magical symbols on it. These spells were incomparable to those he had restored at court. He assumed that the sword must belong to a person of high rank, such as a knight captain. He noticed that skillful inlay and engraving had been used, and he had never seen such exquisite work before. Goral pointed at him and said that Fake had a week, otherwise, if he couldn't do it, he could leave. Fake said that the work would not take long. Goral asked what? MC explained that not all of the symbols had corroded, so the task was not difficult for him. Only some of them were damaged, and he just needed to put the correct characters in the gaps. And considering which characters are at the beginning and end, he begins to understand the overall design of the spells. Alicia said that it was not easy to reproduce the spell exactly, but it was quite possible to cast a very similar one. She knew of spells with a similar effect. Fake exhaled and announced that the job was done. Goral asked, what? How did he finish already? Fake handed him the sword. Goral took it out of its sheath. He swung it. He looked at the blade of the sword and said that it turned out well. He put the sword back in its sheath. He said he couldn't have imagined that Fake was so talented. MC thanked him for his kind words. But Goral said he wasn't ready to accept him as a future husband for his daughter. Alicia apologized to him. Fake thought Mr. Burnist was quite harsh, but apparently he was wrong. MC bowed and said that he would work tirelessly. Goral replied that he expected nothing less. He entrusted the workshop in the mansion to Fake's complete disposal. He told him that he could use the necessary materials and that he would take care of the supplies. In addition, Mr. Burnist applied for a license and asked him not to lose it again. Fake was surprised and asked if he was now allowed to work freely. Goral replied that of course he was, because he was a blacksmith and had the right to decide where to apply his skills. Previously, he had been allowed to cast spells, but he had always been forced to do so. But now he could work with metal. MC couldn't believe his luck. He thanked Mr. Burnist. Mr. Burnist, in turn, said that some knights in his kingdom might need Fake services. He had already informed his servants, asked them for more detailed information. At the moment, he had to leave on business for a while. Fake replied, yes, sir. Goral looked at him from under his eyebrows and told him not to dare lay a finger on his daughter while he was away. Fake replied, of course, sir. MC thanked the gentleman for helping him convince Mr. Burnist. Although he hadn't quite accepted the situation yet, Fake would work on it. Alicia said that this was the first time he had praised someone so highly, and that it was a good sign. Fake smiled and replied that it seemed to be so. He thought about how much he owed Alicia and how wonderful it would be if he could repay her kindness even a little. At that moment, a servant approached and said she was pleased to meet him. The girl introduced herself as Leffy and said she would show them around the estate. MC introduced himself in return. Alicia asked Leffy to be so kind as to show the guest around the estate. They set off to explore the mansion. Leffy led him to the blacksmith's workshop, which had been specially prepared for Lady Alicia's fiancé. Fake realized that blacksmith workshops were mostly arranged in the same way. He noticed the forge and said that it was very rare. He couldn't remember the last time he had seen something like it. Usually, they only used magic in their work, rarely resorting to such tools. Nevertheless, it was great that he now had the opportunity to use it from time to time. Leffy said that if he needed anything else, he could let her know and she would take care of everything. Fake replied that he had all the materials he needed, thanked her, and said that he didn't need anything else. In that case, Leffy asked permission to show him his room. She bowed and said that this is where he would be living. She repeated that if he needed anything, he could ask her. Fake thanked her for her hospitality and replied that if he needed anything, he would let her know. He sat down on a luxurious sofa, and he thought about how his life was starting to get better. Until recently, he had been working in conditions that could have ruined his health at any moment. But now he had a beautiful and kind girl by his side, like his fiancée. And even if the engagement wasn't real, he couldn't have asked for anything better. And most importantly, he was now truly free. He no longer had to worry about work that had to be done by morning, and he would have time to sleep normally. He could take a day off every day if he wanted to. But after thinking about it for a moment, he realized that this was going too far and would not only complicate the engagement, but also significantly damage his reputation. He stared at the ceiling and realized that now he didn't have to do anything. He understood what free time was. But in any case, starting tomorrow, he would resume his duties, and now he would decide for himself how and how much he would work. Before, he couldn't take a step without being beaten. And now he hopes that every day will be just as happy. Alicia fondly remembered the moment when Fake said he would be her fiancé. Leffy approached her and said that MC had settled comfortably into his room. Alicia thanked her for her work. Leffy inquired about the progress of her plan. Alicia replied that everything had gone even better than she had expected. Leffy said she was glad to hear it and asked when she could expect news. Alicia couldn't answer. Leffy said she didn't understand because when she left the residence, the lady said she would ask Fake to be her husband. Alicia exclaimed that she hadn't said that and that it sounded embarrassing. Leffy asked if she had asked him to marry her. Alicia replied that she had tried. Even if it wasn't a real relationship, they had still talked about marriage. It was such a sudden wedding, but she felt calm when she thought about it, and after everything that had happened, she felt a little awkward. Leffy asked if a wedding date had been set. Alicia remained silent. Leffy said that now she understood everything. Alicia had proposed to her fiancé, and that had also been a cover. Alicia said that she had tried and done what she could. Leffy replied that if Fake was even slightly interested, he would understand everything from the lady's behavior. Alicia asked, "What? Is it that obvious?" Leffy replied that it was very obvious and suggested that MC knew everything. She said that it wasn't just noticeable, but even obvious. Alicia asked her not to joke like that. After all, she thought she was doing a good job of hiding it, and now she felt even more awkward. Leffy said that even if it was just a cover, Alicia had already made a statement, so they could start wedding preparations as soon as possible. Alicia replied that her father had not yet given his blessing. Leffy said that he needed to prove himself as a blacksmith, and that they had to wait until Master Goral assessed his abilities. Alicia agreed with her because her family had made a name for themselves in blacksmithing. Therefore, she could only marry a very talented person. And as the daughter of a noble family, she loses her freedom to choose love. She had always known that. But what if it was fake? Then she would be able to marry the one she loved? Alicia wondered. Leffy replied that this was true, but she believed it was too early to rejoice. Meanwhile, all the employees gathered in Mr. Morgan's office. He looked at each of them with a heavy gaze. One of the employees asked what Mr. Morgan was going to do. Would he hire someone new? After all, that idiot Fake still hadn't returned, and he was too much of a show-off for an apprentice. Mr. Morgan said that in that case, he would have to cut his salary and monthly bonuses in half. He asked if they needed an apprentice. One of the workers said they didn't need one. Seda said he agreed and asked Morgan for his opinion. Morgan, in turn, asked Seda what he thought of the Burnist house, to which Lady Alicia belonged. Seda replied that the house was known only for its title. But rumor has it that they sometimes choose the most talented blacksmiths to marry their daughters. Originally, the Burnist family were simple blacksmiths. One glance at Fake is enough for them to understand that he is untalented and that obviously no one will want to hire him. Seda tried to give him a couple of orders, but Fake couldn't even hold a hammer properly and kept falling over. Morgan asked Seda if he thought Fake would eventually be fired. Seda replied yes because he had simply lost his way, but in the end, he would crawl back to them. The only question was how long the burn-ass would tolerate him before kicking him out. Morgan said it would be a week at most, no more. Someone who has nowhere else to go will eventually come back to them. In that case, he would give him a week's worth of work plus the week he missed. and they would assign everything to Fake again. Great idea, said the workers. This way, everything would be settled for the next 2 weeks, and they wouldn't have to start right away and would have enough time before Fake returned. And he deserved this punishment. Morgan said that first they needed to explain to the knight that they would not be able to start work immediately due to some urgent matters. And he, in turn, would take the sword for now. Morgan laughed and said that Fake would soon realize what a failure he was. And then he would chase him around again like a useless servant. And he would work harder than ever and let him just try to fail at the work that had piled up during his absence. Morgan eagerly awaited Fake's return and knew that by the time he was kicked out, he would have a fitting punishment ready for him. MC woke up before dawn again, and it had already become a habit. During his service at court, he always rose with the first rays of the sun to complete all his work alone, and sometimes to finish what was left over from the previous day. This was also part of his daily routine of casting spells, new orders, and responsibilities beyond those of an ordinary blacksmith. Every day, from dawn to midnight, over and over again. But now, when he wakes up so early, there is no work yet. It had been quite some time since he had been in the smithy. He got out of bed, stretched, and said, "Let's get started." Fake picked up a crystal in his hand. It was witch ore and it looked great. Witch ore is a special metal that is sensitive to spells. It is indispensable for blacksmithing because only this material can be enchanted. Enchanting it increases the strength of the steel many times over. And most importantly, it is easy to obtain from demons. To extract iron, you have to sit in the mines without leaving, and when one is empty, you have to look for the next one. To get witch ore, you just need to kill a demon. Fake noticed the gloves. He noticed that they were made of demon skin and were quite durable, with the gloves withstanding high temperatures well. After all, blacksmiths use the magic of fire, water, and earth. But first, he would need fire. There are several types of witch ore. The rarest and highest quality is marked with an S grade. It is followed by grades A, B, C, D, E, and F, respectively. The most commonly used are F and E grade ores, which are not of the highest quality. Fake decided that today he would try something simple to warm up. He is not going to create the most powerful weapon in the world, so this crystal will be enough. He decided to make a knife, and now the ore was red hot, and it was time to send it to the casting mold. After that, the temperature is raised even higher. In the old days, blacksmiths hardened metal in a fire pit, but today this technology is considered obsolete. This makes the material malleable and soft. Then he creates a clay mold with the magic of the earth and pours metal into it. Then the mold is cooled with water magic. A steel ingot is then extracted from it. He softens it slightly by heating it and then shapes it as desired. Fake hammered the metal on an anvil and realized that this sound was unlike anything else. After all, it is necessary to listen to the sound and cool and heat the steel several times. This improves the quality, and with the improvement in quality, the purity and magical potential of the metal increase. But today he didn't have enough time for the knife, so he decided that next time he would prepare the materials in advance, because there was so much he wanted to do. And so, after shaping the metal, he examined the knife and realized that it was exactly what he had planned. Now it's time to work with clay. This will cool the blade area and increase its strength, as well as enhance the magical potential of the material. Before starting to grind, it is important to distribute the magic evenly over the surface. Prepare some cold water, and immediately, a pattern appears in the cutting edge area. Then, using wind magic, he sharpens the blade. And now that the surface is smooth and shiny, all that remains is to cast a spell. After casting the spell, the knife is ready, and MC decides to try it out. He makes a small brick out of clay and cuts it in half with a light movement. Examining the knife, he realizes that the sharpness and weight are just right. Wrapping the handle with cloth, he remembers that he hasn't done this in a long time, and now he has spent 3 whole hours on it. Fake suggested that it was time for breakfast, which he had completely forgotten about. Previously, due to the amount of work he only had time for rare snacks right in the forge. Turning around, he noticed Alicia. Fake was surprised and asked how long she had been standing there. Alicia laughed and replied that it had been about an hour. Leffy told her that he was working in the workshop today, so she came. That long? Fake was surprised. He hadn't even noticed. Alicia smiled and replied that he was very focused. MC looked at her chest with an embarrassed look. Alicia asked him not to look at her like that because it made her uncomfortable. Fake covered his face with his hands and apologized. He thought that he had messed up again because she was right. He shouldn't look at her like that. Fake apologized again and said she just looked cute. Alicia asked cute and then replied that everything was fine. After all, she was his fiancée, and there was nothing wrong with looking at her at the right moment. Right? She asked. Fake thought about it. The right moment? He told himself not to overthink things. He wasn't her real fiancé, and she was just pretending not to notice who was staring at her. He continued to stand there, burning with shame. Then he said that she had come all this way to see him work, and he hadn't even noticed her presence, and he apologized for that. Alicia asked him not to worry about it, because he had worked so hard on that knife, and she was happy to watch. Fake looked at her smile, and thought it was something special, her smile shining brighter than the sun. Alicia asked permission to look at the knife. Fake said sure. Alicia took the knife in her hands. She examined it and said that it was very beautiful and that it was made from E-class, or the blade was so sharp and exquisitely crafted that she found it hard to believe it was only E rank. MC asked if it was true and thanked her for her warm words, because he had tried to make something good. If he had had a little more time, he would have made it even better, and if he had known that Alicia would be looking, he would have put in even more effort. Alicia made a flourish with her knife. Fake was surprised that she knew how to handle a blade. Alicia said that she had been taught the basics of fencing, just a little for self-defense. She tossed the knife and then caught it. She made another swing. Fake watched and realized that she was very good at it. Alicia continued to demonstrate her skill with the blade. She stopped and asked if she had done something wrong. Fake asked what she meant. Alicia replied that he had just looked at her strangely. Fake laughed and thought, here we go again. He was staring at her again. He told her that he was just a little distracted, but that she looked beautiful. Alicia asked, beautiful, and that's all? MC replied that it was truly strikingly beautiful. She took him by the sleeve and asked him to repeat it while looking her in the eyes. Fake looked at her and said again that it was strikingly beautiful. Alicia thanked him, and Fake thought about how, even though this engagement wasn't real, Alicia was so convincing in maintaining the appearance of a relationship with him. It looked quite sincere. At moments like this, he couldn't help wondering if he really did care about her. Although, come to think of it, surely almost any girl could pretend convincingly. At least that's what he had heard. Alicia smiled and invited him to come with her, as breakfast was ready. Fake said yes, of course, but first he said he needed to take a shower to do his business. And then, at the table, Alicia asked him if he had always been so good at casting spells. Fake replied, of course not. But the work always had to be done quickly and efficiently, and he had a lot of responsibility, so over time he got the hang of it. Thanks to those hellish days, he can now cast spells quickly and efficiently. He wondered why the time he spent with her warmed his heart so much. Fake thanked Leffy for breakfast. MC remembered that when he was walking to the smithy, he smelled bread. He asked if they always baked it in the morning. He took a bite of a French roll. The bread was warm, soft, fragrant, and delicious, incredibly delicious. Tears began to roll down his cheeks. Alicia asked what was wrong. She was surprised that he was crying. She asked again what was wrong. Fake apologized. He couldn't even remember the last time he had seen such treats. Alicia replied that she understood and asked him to tell her more about his past. MC said that he usually worked late into the night, so he often didn't have time to eat a bite during the day. And if he did manage to find time for lunch, he ate while working. He didn't have time to savor the taste of food, only to swallow it while he had the chance. But now, as he shared a meal with her, for him, it's the best breakfast ever, so it's just tears of happiness. Alicia responded well. Then she said he could take his time and just enjoy it. Fake thanked her. Then they took a carriage to the city so Alicia could show him around. She asked if he enjoyed his breakfast. Fake replied that it was delicious. When they reached the city, Alicia covered herself with a cloak. She asked if her face was well covered. Fake replied yes. Then he asked why she was being so secretive. Alicia explained that she didn't socialize in the city, but many people introduced themselves to her father at festivals, so someone might recognize her face. MC remembered what Leffy had said. People in the city were jealous of Alicia because of her beauty, and if they recognized her, they wouldn't be able to enjoy a peaceful walk. Alicia smiled and said that their walk was like a date. Fake replied that it really did feel like a date, but he didn't understand why it was such a big deal. Alicia was upset by these words. MC explained his words by saying that he wasn't her real fiancé, so he didn't understand why she was putting so much effort into a date with him. He also thought that if he succeeded as a blacksmith and earned her father's approval, that would be enough. After all, she didn't want to marry some stranger, so she got engaged to him for appearance's sake, and he was just a cover, so there was no need for her to pretend they were on a date. Leffy interrupted their conversation, saying that Mr. Gorel wanted Alicia to marry a talented blacksmith and was trying to contribute to her happiness in his own way. He also wanted to make sure that Alicia would marry for love. That's why he wasn't rushing her into marriage. Alicia was surprised by Leffy's appearance. She confirmed everything Leffy said. She said that this date was also very important to her, so she asked Leffy not to worry about anything. Fake replied that she wouldn't. Leffy asked permission to take her leave and wished them a wonderful time. MC was surprised that Leffy had been nearby all this time. He hadn't noticed her presence at all, although he hadn't expected anything less from an accompanying servant. He realized that Leffy knew about the nature of their relationship, and it made him feel a little better that someone else knew about it. Alicia turned to him and asked to return to the conversation about how to influence her father's opinion. She asked to take his hand. Fake asked if they needed to walk hand in hand, and if that would influence Mr. Goral's opinion. Alicia replied that it was true, because you never know when you might run into one of his knights. MC thought about how he had held her hand before, but now they were on a date, and he was a little more nervous than usual. Her hand felt warmer than last time. He thought that now she might see him as a man. They continued their walk. Fake said with a satisfied look on his face that he couldn't remember the last time he had walked so calmly through the city. Alicia replied that from now on, he no longer needed to rush anywhere. Fake said that even though he no longer needed to exhaust himself with work, he would still make every effort to improve his skills. And if things continued like this, perhaps Mr. Goral would accept him. Alicia asked him to promise that he would not do anything rash. Fake agreed. Meanwhile, all the swords in Mr. Morgan's smithy lay idle. Morgan was surprised that Fake had left them more than a week ago, but had not yet returned. He asked if this incompetent individual had no sense of professional duty whatsoever. One of the employees advised him to be patient. After all, the Burnist residence is quite far from the capital, and he believes that if Fake is dismissed, he will have to walk there. Morgan replied that this was a predictable outcome for a good-for-nothing like him. After all, they were the only ones he could rely on for mercy. He no longer even has a blacksmith's license, and without documents he will not be able to work, so he has no choice but to go to court for a new ID. He clenched his fist and declared that the conditions for his return were simple. No pay for the first 2 months, then only a pittance. There was a knock at the door. Morgan thought it was Fake, but it was the captain who entered the door. He said they hadn't seen each other in a long time. Morgan asked how he could be of service. The captain said he had an order for spells. He put his sword on the table. Morgan asked if he would be a suitable candidate. Morgan thought about the fact that he was accepting an order from the holder of the highest knightly title in the country. And despite the fact that he had his own blacksmith, whose genius was undeniable, he still came to ask him. One of the workers asked what had brought such a distinguished person to them. Morgan said that the order would be accepted immediately. The captain asked him to wait and find out something first. He wanted to speak to the person who had enchanted the sword. Morgan replied that the sword belonged to a common knight and had been worked on by their apprentice named Fake. Morgan thought that the captain had come to complain about the MC's mediocre work. But the captain examined the sword and said that it was a blessing for their current knights. Morgan asked what he meant. The captain said that when he was a simple knight, the swords they were given were barely enchanted and were practically no different from ordinary ones. Morgan remembered that in those days he didn't really cast spells, as there was no opportunity to do so. And Fake was far from being a decent spellcaster. His spells were always so ridiculous that even with maximum effort, he would have surpassed his work many times over. But the captain was clearly saying something strange. The swords he remembered from those days were like trash. And the captain said that a blacksmith who could enchant a sword so well, even for a simple knight, deserved praise, and he would like to entrust Fake with his own sword. Morgan didn't understand what kind of nonsense this man was talking about. The captain asked if he had not made himself clear. He wanted Fake to cast the spell, and he asked where to find him. Morgan asked in annoyance why Fake specifically. The captain explained that he himself did not have the ability to read magical writings, but his blacksmith said that the work done on this blade was excellent, and he had come to them to meet this master. But he did not understand where he was. Morgan replied that MC wasn't very talented, so he let him go for a while. The captain asked again, what? Not talented? How do you mean? Morgan replied that Fake may have managed to cast some decent spells once, but that was more of an exception, just luck. After all, he cast dozens, even hundreds of spells a week, and a couple of them may have turned out decent. But he has absolutely no potential and will never become a master, no matter how much effort he puts in. The captain practically agreed with this, but he still wanted Fake to be assigned the job, and said that he would leave the sword with them for now. Morgan asked if he could cast the spells. After all, he was the head of the workshop and could certainly handle the task much better than a regular apprentice. The captain replied that since Fake was on vacation, he would be back soon. He had time and could wait until then. He asked him to convey his regards. He said he would eagerly await the results of his work. Morgan replied angrily that he understood. He was annoyed that the captain kept mentioning the boy's name. The captain headed for the exit and said that he was counting on them and asked to tell one of his knights when the work was finished. Morgan didn't understand what nonsense the captain was talking about. After all, he said he couldn't even see the magic code. And if even his work as an MC brings him such delight, what would he say about his work? After all, against the backdrop of Fake, his spells would go down in history. Seda asked Morgan what he was going to do. Morgan said he was going to seize his chance, as it was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Seda asked what he meant. Morgan smiled and replied that he would cast the spell himself. Seda was surprised and wondered if that was acceptable. Morgan replied that since even Fake's spell had impressed the captain, his spell would surely exceed all expectations. And when that happened, he would be able to become the captain's personal blacksmith. The other workers were confused. One of them wondered if their boss's reaction was too presumptuous. Another agreed with him and asked if the order wasn't addressed to the entire blacksmith's workshop. They said that anyone could do it better than Fake. After all, the spells were so weak that they were barely noticeable. Morgan declared that he would not miss this opportunity and that the profit would be his, and he would take this job for himself. By becoming the captain's personal blacksmith, he would write his name in the history of blacksmithing. As the fifth son in a count's family, he didn't have many prospects and never thought he would get a chance like this. And now he is the head of the court smithy and his next goal. Opportunities are clearly in the air, Morgan surmised, and he seized one of them. He set to work with his sword. Meanwhile, Fake and Alicia reached the clock tower. It offers the most beautiful view of the city. Fake says he can't wait to see it. They climbed to the top of the long staircase. Alicia said there was just a little bit left. Fake replied that he was already tired. He asked how Alicia was feeling. And so they reached the observation deck, where a beautiful view opened up, from which every house in the city was visible. Alicia asked what he was thinking about, and said that this was her favorite place. Fake replied that it was wonderful and very beautiful. He suggested that the view of the city at night or at dawn would also be beautiful. Alicia replied that it was indeed beautiful at night, and asked if he wanted to watch the sunset. Fake replied happily. MC said that he had worked up a sweat climbing the stairs, and now felt cold. He wondered where they could shelter from the wind. He looked around the observation deck and saw a couple next to him, and they were kissing. Alicia and Fake were embarrassed by the situation. Fake thought it was shameless and that Alicia shouldn't have to watch it. He offered her a seat on the bench, and so they sat there in silence, trying to process what they had seen. MC felt awkward in front of her and tried to find a topic of conversation. But Alicia turned to him. She asked him if he would mind kissing her. He thought about how he had never even imagined such a thing. He replied that they were just pretending to be in a relationship and didn't have to go that far. A man shouted that the girl had misunderstood everything. The girl replied that there was nothing to understand and that he was simply a cheater. Fake noticed that another girl had appeared next to the couple. The man asked them to listen to him. There was the sound of a slap, and the girls walked away from him. The man shouted after them, "Wait. It's not cheating, he just made a mistake." "A mistake?" the girls asked. They called him a womanizer. Alicia laughed. She asked if it looked like the guy had been caught cheating. Fake replied that it looked that way. Alicia asked, "Cheating is not acceptable, right?" Fake was surprised by this question. He replied that he believed so. He wondered what she meant or if she was just joking. After all, he didn't dare to think about such a thing. Sometime later, at Mr. Goral's mansion, there was a discussion about future prospects. Mr. Goral said that he needed MC to demonstrate his abilities. Fake replied that he understood. Goral said that the new license would allow him to trade in the city. He told Fake to craft whatever he wanted and sell it in the city shop. Fake replied, "Yes, sir." However, Goral asked him not to mention that Fake was Alicia's fiancé. Fake bowed and replied that, of course, he would start crafting today. Goral said that he would provide him with any amount of F and E grade or for supplies. Fake would prepare higher quality materials himself. Fake replied yes, and thought that he would be able to craft tools for ordinary citizens, and that E grade would be more than enough. He left the office and exhaled. After all, it was time to truly return to his craft. And to start with, he would prepare the materials. A day later, Fake thought about the fact that the most common type of weapon that could be sold in the shop was a long sword. But first, he needed to decide on the quantity. He also had to consider the quality. Even if the weapons were high quality and well-balanced, no one would buy them if the price was too high. His clients will mainly be adventurers. Their ranks range from F to the highest, S. But there are very few S-ranked adventurers. Most of them are D or E. He figured that ideally, an adventurer would need a sword that wouldn't need to be replaced when their rank changed. And maybe it would be worth making something similar to the swords he forged for knights. First, he decided to work on the shape. But he hadn't made a long sword in a long time and needed to try hard. With difficulty, he gave it its initial shape. After all, the shape had to be strong enough not to deform under the influence of high temperatures. Then the witches or was melted. If he poured the liquid or into the mold and cooled it with water magic, the material would cool down pretty quickly. And now it was almost ready. Looking at the sword, MC realized that it had turned out very well. Then the temperature is raised again to harden the metal and polished with wind magic. The dagger is already shining. Next, you need to make a couple of wooden nails to secure the handle. After that, connect it and hammer the nails into the drilled holes. Fake originally planned to attach it at the base of the handle, but preferred another method. Then comes the casting of spells. And so he crafted a simple long sword. He tested the blade with his finger and realized that the sword was sharp enough. He decided to make another one just like it. At court, weapons were enchanted with quite powerful spells, which were sent for correction every week, because knights could be sent at any moment to fight monsters that a simple guard could not defeat. But an ordinary adventurer would not need such powerful spells. In the end, he made 3 swords and couldn't understand where he got so much strength. If his magic had weakened, he would not have been able to continue, but apparently he had enough strength. This meant that the reworkings at court led to a constant shortage of them. Evening came. A lot of time had passed, and Alicia would be coming soon. MC managed to craft 5 swords. He decided to call it a day. Heading to the break room, he wondered if there was a towel in the forge to dry himself off. He found a shelf with towels and heard someone calling his name. Alicia came into the smithy and looked for him. Wiping his face with a towel, he watched her look under the dresser and wondered how she could even think he was hiding there. He smiled and decided to play a joke on her, quietly creeping up behind her. Fate came up behind her and scared her. He laughed and said that the mission was accomplished. Alicia was indignant and asked where he had been. Fake replied that he had been in the break room. She shouted, asking if he was serious about scaring her. Fake laughed and said he had won because she hadn't noticed him at all. She asked if he was done. MC replied yes. Alicia picked up the sword and asked if that was all for today. She noticed that he had even made an emblem on the hilt. Fake replied yes. Surprisingly, he was hardly tired, so he could have done more. Alicia was amazed at his endurance. Fake reminded her that he had been working in much harsher conditions for the last 3 years. So now he wasn't tired at all, and he thought he really should make another sword. Alicia objected, saying that he should rest, because he had been working tirelessly since morning. Fake scratched the back of his head and replied yes. During court service, such a workload would have drained him, but he feels like he is getting better. He remembered that this is usually called personal growth, or maybe he has just become immune to fatigue. Alicia asked if he was obsessed with his work. Fake hesitated and replied that he just needed to be cautious. She asked if he was going to sell swords tomorrow. MC replied yes. He asked if he needed to go to town. Alicia replied yes. After all, merchants would be gathering in town over the next 2 days. Fake thought that he just wanted to sell a few swords and see what they were worth. He thought they turned out quite well, considering that they were forged from E-class, or in his native village, such work was highly valued. So much so that he ended up in the court smithy, despite his lowly origins. But at court, he was considered completely untalented, and his feelings were not spared. In any case, now he will need to assert himself a little more confidently. Alicia asked if he had decided on a price. Fake replied that he planned to ask for 30,000 to 50,000 gold for the sword. This was a fair price for the main weapon of a D-rank adventurer. Alicia replied, excellent. If E-ranks put in a little effort, they will also be able to afford them. Fake replied that this was what they would settle on. He said he would try to sell all the swords tomorrow. Alicia told him that his moment of glory was approaching. MC asked her not to worry. Alicia said she would help him. Fake remembered Mr. Goral's words. He replied that he was not going to use Alicia's position to increase sales. Alicia said that in that case, she would wear a mask. Fake asked if that would look suspicious. Alicia assured him that everything would be fine. Moreover, it could be said that he was doing all this for her. So she just wanted to help. After all, she was here for him and asked to do it together. Fake sighed and replied that he understood. But first, they needed to consult with Mr. Goral. Alicia promised to tell him, thinking that he would not mind them working together. After a while reading a book in his room, Fake heard a knock. He left the room and saw Alicia. Then he asked how it went. Alicia smiled. She said that her father had agreed, but on the condition that her identity remain a secret. Fake smiled and replied that it was wonderful and that he was now looking forward to tomorrow. Alicia looked into his eyes with a smile and said yes. She wants to do everything she can to show people that Fake's products are the best. MC thanked her. He thought about how much effort she was putting into this for him, and he was worried that he wouldn't sell anything. But now, that was simply impossible. Soon his first business venture would begin. He would be trading for the first time. Before he came to the court, he worked on a barter basis. He gave daggers, armor, and swords. In return, he received food, clothing, and shelter. The village was small, and everyone learned from each other. At court, he didn't have time to delve into the intricacies of market relations. So he believes that by now, everything has only become more complicated. He cannot confidently understand what price to set for his work. Every merchant should be able to take such things into account competently. At the market entrance, he was told that he had to pay a fee and he would receive a permit to buy and sell goods for the day. Fake paid up. Alicia was wearing a mask. MC said that he shouldn't mention her name in public. And then he asked, "Is that right?" Alicia replied, "Yes, because if people find out that he has a connection with the Duke, he will break the promise he made to her father." Fake replied that this was precisely why they should be extremely careful. "So a nickname?" she asked. Fake replied, "Perhaps," and asked how he should address her. Alicia suggested the name Ollie. Fake answered well. In public, he will call her Ollie. He asked if trading was only allowed on market days. Alicia replied yes. To sell goods at other times, you need to have your own shop and special documents. Fake answered clearly. He thought that for now, a regular counter would suffice, and in the future he would open a real shop. The prospect of real trade excited him greatly. He applied for a trading license, and he was able to secure a spot. He put up a flag with a sword, shield, and axe on it. So far, he had only put 2 swords up for sale. Time passed, but no one approached. Fake thought that people weren't just not buying, they weren't even approaching him. Of course, he didn't expect it to be easy, but he didn't expect it to be this difficult. Meanwhile, a crowd gathered at the neighboring stall. MC suggested that he had displayed his goods incorrectly. After all, the others looked better. Then he decided he needed to come up with a better design. Alicia noticed the guy. She approached him and asked if he was an adventurer. She told him that they had weapons for sale. The guy turned around and asked if she was talking to him. Alicia asked if he was interested in the goods. The guy turned around and walked away. Fake sighed and said that the fish had gotten away. Alicia apologized and said that she was probably more of a hindrance than a help. Fake replied that this was not the case and that he was glad she had called out to the stranger. He was just happy that they were together. Alicia replied, "Good. I won't let him down." After a while, no one had approached them. Alicia said that they had a high-quality sword, and she was sure that people would be interested in it. MC remembered that when he worked in the village, people didn't approach him right away either, and he knew that the first deal was the hardest. But he was confident in his work. Any adventurer from his target ranks would love these swords. A young guy named Ivis approached the counter and exclaimed in surprise, "Wow." Then he asked if they sold long swords. The guys were surprised and replied, "Of course, you can look at them and even check how the swords feel in your hand." Ivis took the sword in his hands and examined the blade. Then he swung it and looked at the blade again. Fake asked if he was an adventurer. The young man replied yes. Then he said that he was currently F rank, but was going to move up to E rank. He gave his opinion that the sword was very comfortable and light. Fake replied that he had cast a special spell on it. He himself thought that an adventurer with an F rank might be a little short of funds. Ivis said that against this backdrop, the sword would be more difficult to use than others. Fake smiled and said that was possible. The young man asked if the MC would agree to 10,000 gold. Fake was mentally outraged. 10,000 gold? So little? Under other circumstances, he would have started bargaining. But in this case, that was out of the question. He understood that the guy had named the amount he had on him. In that case, he decided to say that the price of this sword was 50,000 gold. The young man was surprised and asked, "Really?" Fake knew that this was not true. After all, the price of this sword was 30,000, and even if he made concessions, he would not lower the price below 20,000. But today he came to the fair to make a name for himself. Ivis replied that he thought the price was justified because the sword was really good. Fake said that he could make an exception for the first time and sell it for 10,000. Really? The young man was delighted. Fake asked him to tell his friends who needed a sword about it in return. Every week on market day, he would be behind the counter with a flag like this. Ivis happily replied, "Of course," and then added that he would tell all his friends about it. He gave him the money and happily left with the sword. Fake looked at the handful of coins and thought that it was less than he had hoped for, but at least it was some income. The Duke said he would supply him with as much material as he needed, so he didn't have to worry about expenses for now. Alicia congratulated him on his first sale. Fake replied that he had achieved his goal for the day. Alicia asked what his goal was, but they still had 4 swords left. Fake knew that it was unlikely that he would be able to sell them all, so he set himself the goal of selling at least one. And now, when the young adventurer showed his sword to his friends, his customer base would gradually grow. Alicia replied that it would definitely work, because the sword was made by MC. Fake replied, "Yeah, he believes that next time will be better than today." His first earnings on the market were 10,000 gold, but he thinks it's a good start. After all, someone bought his sword. He was very happy about that, and he really wanted to report the results to Mr. Goral. Goral asked how things were going in the city. MC reported that he had sold 1 long sword, and as a token of gratitude for the materials and access to the workshop, he placed a bag of coins on the table and asked the gentleman to accept it. Goral replied that he had no intention of stopping the supply of which, and asked him not to worry about it. Fake thanked him. Goral said that the 10,000 gold profit meant that Fake had lowered the price to make the deal, and then asked if that was correct. MC replied that it was true and that he had work to do. Goro replied that he couldn't trust him with his daughter in this situation. Fake assured him that sales would only grow in the future, and he had no doubt about it. Goro asked him to convince him not with words, but with results. MC shouted that this would be the case. After all, he was Alicia's fiancé. When he got to his room, Fake thought about how he needed to study the market in more detail to understand how to increase sales. He tried to figure out which class of weapons was considered the most popular in the city. But since it was already evening, he decided to postpone it until tomorrow. The next day, on Adventurer Street, the guys went to explore the weapon shops. At first, Fake wanted to see how these shops displayed their goods. He noticed one of the shops. He saw adventurers examining swords. He realized that there was still a demand for long swords. Of two equally effective options, people tend to prefer the one that looks more impressive. He suggested that perhaps he should also decorate the handle with some carving. He decided to diversify his range with daggers, as they could be used as throwing weapons. There was also demand for utility knives, and he assumed that housewives often used them in their daily lives. Alicia led MC to the Adventurers Guild. There, you can meet representatives of all ranks, which can be useful. The administrator asked those around him if they had registered. They asked if they needed to sign in somewhere. MC thought that at some point it might come in handy. If he needed money, he could earn it here. Alicia suggested that they go and register. Notes from guild members and admission rules were posted on the wall. The table was turned into a bar counter. Fake joked that adventurers never change, especially the smell of beer. Alicia laughed and said it was because they live life to the fullest. MC said he would take care of the registration and asked them to wait. Alicia replied, "Okay." A couple of adventurers noticed them. Fake saw that there were different sections in front of him, for orders, for sales, and for adventure registration. There was no line at all, and he figured it wouldn't take long. The administrator said that only two things were needed for registration: a name and a personal file. Fake realized that he did not have a personal file and would therefore have to fill out an application from scratch. He put his license on the table and asked for a guild member card to be issued in that name and for his magical abilities to be entered on it. The administrator informed him that everything was ready. She thanked him for registering and informed him that if he lost the document, he should contact them as soon as possible. The first card is issued free of charge, but a small fee is charged if it is lost. Fake replied that he understood everything. The administrator thanked him again and wished him success. He apologized to Alicia for the long wait, and he saw that the same couple of adventurers were pestering her. They asked her if she was an adventurer. Then they asked her to show her face. Then they offered to give her a few assignments. Alicia said she was waiting for someone. The man asked, "Huh?" Then he said that they were better than some guy because they were C-rank adventurers. He said, "How about coming with us to," but didn't get to finish because MC covered his mouth with his hand and stood in front of him. The man asked what. Alicia called out to MC. Fake turned to Alicia and said it was time to go. He took her by the hand and said that they were done here, and they headed for the exit. The man shouted, "Hey." After all, they were talking. Fake apologized to Alicia. He said they needed to go and it would be best to move through the crowd. The man wouldn't let up and kept calling after him. A man in a hoodie, PS most likely Leffy's servant, stood in their way, and they told him to go away and called him a demon. The man with the disfigured face asked them what they had said to him. The adventurers looked at him in fear. The guys left the Adventurers Guild. Alicia apologized and said that no one had ever treated her like that before. Fake asked if she was okay. Alicia replied that she was a little scared. Fake took her hand. He said it was his fault because he could have taken her with him. Alicia replied that everything was fine. After all, he had arrived in time. Besides, Leffy was also nearby. If there was any danger, she would intervene, so he shouldn't worry about it. Fake said that he had almost finished studying the market demand and suggested they go for a walk. Alicia replied that since they were already there, they might as well go for a bite to eat. Sometime later, in the smithy, there was still time before the next market days. Fake wanted to try to improve the quality of the daggers. He decided to see what this or was capable of. First, he decided to meld it using the classic method. Then he poured it into a mold created with earth magic, and then make a steel plate. The next step was to improve the quality of the steel, which contains many undesirable components. He decided to use magical techniques to extract them from the material. He decided to raise the temperature of the plate and constantly apply the hammer, maintaining the desired level of heat. This must be repeated several times to bring the quality of the metal to perfection. Then he decided to check the magic code. He saw that the runes were still in disarray. If magical techniques are applied incorrectly, it can destroy the magical code. He realized that he needed to work on the direction of the magical flow when working with the hammer. MC struck the plate. He checked the magic code again and realized that it was still rough, but he had managed to fix something. The final adjustments to the spells are made at the very end, when all the other work has already been done. At this point, the last ores are restored. It is not necessary to cast spells from the very beginning. This process can be postponed until the end. Then it was time to shape the plate into a knife, cool it with water magic, and then polish it with wind. MC tried the result and cut a clay brick. He said, yeah, the edge of the blade is perfectly shaped and there are no problems with sharpness, so it's ready. Fake thought that this knife could be used both in battle and for cutting meat. The magic component took a lot of time, but thanks to this, the quality of the knife is higher than that of a standard E-class weapon. And he seemed to have gotten into a rhythm, but if he didn't take a break now, Alicia would worry. He thought about making another one later. But that's enough for today. It really bothered him that he couldn't stop, but then he would make Alicia worry about him again. Alicia warned him that she was coming in. Then she said he had done an excellent job. She asked how he was doing. Fake replied that he was doing pretty well and was just finishing up. Then he offered to show her. Alicia picked up the dagger and said, wow, the quality is even better than last time. Fake was embarrassed and thought about how she knew how to impress. He thanked her and then said that after her words, he wanted to make another one. Alicia looked at him sadly. Then she said that she knew there were still a few days before the auction, but asked him not to rush today. She said that she really enjoyed watching him work, but he spent so much time in the forge that she felt lonely. She understood that it was very important to him, but she would be happy if she could spend a little more time with him. Then she asked if she was bothering him. Fake clutched his chest and thought she was very sweet. Then he told himself not to get carried away, because Alicia wasn't really his fiancée. He noticed that the maid had come to say that dinner was served, and he realized that Alicia had noticed the maid before he did and instantly slipped into the role of a fiancée to look convincing. After all, you never know when people might be watching them, so they had to act as if they were in love. MC replied that she didn't bother him, and he wanted to be with her as long as possible, even if only for a second. So his work was done for today, and they would spend the day together. Alicia was burning with embarrassment, and she thanked him for agreeing. Fake didn't understand what was happening to her and why she was blushing. He asked if she was okay. Meanwhile, the maid was crying as she watched them. It was fair day. Alicia said that they were far from where they had been last time. Fake explained that he wanted to leave early, but got a little carried away. Then he said it would be better to stay in one place that people would remember, but that was difficult at the market. After all, whoever came first got the spot. MC put the weapons on the counter and said that everything was ready. Alicia asked if the swords were priced the same as last time. What about the daggers? Fake replied yes. The quality of the knives and daggers was higher, but they required fewer materials to produce, so he planned to sell them for about 20,000 to 30,000 gold. Alicia smiled and replied that she understood. The trade began. Alicia called out to people, asking them to take a look at the merchandise. Fake thought that, as he had expected, it would not be easy to attract customers. But Alicia's voice was clear, so people could hear her words, but they did not approach the store. MC thought that he had no salesmanship whatsoever. But Alicia turned to him. She said that he needed to speak with pride. After all, he had wonderful products and needed to behave accordingly. He looked at her and replied that she was right. Fake smiled at passing shoppers and tried to attract them. But an hour had already passed. He asked Alicia if she was tired. Alicia replied that everything was fine and she was trying her best. At that moment, Ivis approached. He greeted them. He said that he had brought someone, as promised. He introduced his friend as Weather and said that he was also an adventurer and that they were on the same team. Fake thanked him. Weather looked at the weapon. He asked to see the sword. MC replied, of course. Ivis said that the sword he had bought was very easy to handle. It was sharp, light, fit perfectly in his hand, and was far superior to his previous ones. Fake thanked him. Ivis said that thanks to this sword, he had risen to E rank last week, and the guild said that his progress was very rapid, and now he was a celebrity there. MC congratulated the young man and asked him if he hadn't achieved this thanks to his abilities. Ivis smiled and replied that this was not true. Weather examined the blade. Then he said he would buy the sword. He asked how much it cost. Fake thought for a moment. Then he asked if 40,000 gold would be enough. Weather asked him to lower the price to 30,000. MC thought about it. Then he said okay, but in return, if he liked the quality, he would recommend them to his friends. Weather said sure. He paid and thanked him for the sword. Ivis carefully examined the assortment and said that today they even had knives. Fake said that these knives had a wide range of uses and would be useful both in battle and for cutting up prey. Ivis replied that a knife for hunting was an appealing idea. He usually used a sword for this. He asked how much it would cost. MC replied 30,000 per piece. Ivis apologized and asked for a slight discount. Fake understood that this time he had the opportunity to bargain, but 30,000 was the maximum price and he could only give a small discount. He said that since Ivis had come with a friend today, he could offer 20,000. Ivis agreed to the deal. He took out a bag of coins. MC addressed him. He said that he had mentioned using a sword for cutting and asked to take a look. MC took the sword in his hands and read the magic code. Then he said that the spell had worn off a little. Ivis asked in surprise, "Does Fake know how it works?" He knew that blacksmiths sometimes cast spells to make swords better. And he asked, "Is that right?" MC replied, "Yes, every sword contains a so-called magic code, and it's just starting to wear out." Ivis asked, "Can it be fixed?" Fake smiled and replied, "Of course. After all, he is a blacksmith, and it will be no trouble for him. For the first time, he will renew the spells for free." MC began to renew the spell. A little later, he handed over the finished work and said that there should be no more problems. Ivis thanked him. Fake said that next time the price for such a service would be 5,000 gold, so he asked to treat the weapon with care. But if anything happens, they also offer such services and can be contacted. Ivis smiled and replied that he definitely would, if he made a lot of money. And then he said goodbye. Alicia thanked the buyer. Ivis noticed her. Fake smiled and said that she was his assistant, Ollie. Ivis laughed and asked if she was Fake's girlfriend. MC was mentally outraged by these words. He thought that Alicia was actually his fiancée, but it was just for show, so he didn't want to talk about it openly. Alicia replied shyly that she was just an assistant in the shop. Ivis said, "So that's how it is. It must be nice to work with your beloved." He himself dreams of one day traveling with some cute adventuress. Fake didn't understand what was wrong with this young man, but wished him luck. Ivis immersed himself in his wet fantasies and replied yes. Weather thanked him again and pulled his friend by the shoulder. And they left. Fake couldn't believe his luck, because he never thought he would earn so much. And the efforts he put in last week are already starting to pay off. He asked Alicia if everything was going well, calling her Ollie. Alicia was indignant at this name. She said that she was his fiancée and he could have told her. Fake replied that in that case, her identity could have been revealed. He thought to himself that the engagement wasn't real anyway. He was a little embarrassed. Alicia lightened the mood a little and said that they had had good sales today. Fake replied, "Exactly." And then he said he hoped these young adventurers would achieve a lot with his weapons in their hands. He really wanted to know how their fate would unfold. But by that time, it was already noon, and in the end, no one else approached them after the young adventurers. Fake thought that they were just unlucky. It was important not to rush and to do everything gradually. Alicia called him and said they had a buyer. It was a blonde man named Rig, dressed like a traveler. He looked at the assortment and thoughtfully said that he saw swords and daggers for sale. Fake replied yes, and then asked if he wanted to take a look. The buyer took the dagger out of its sheath and examined it. He said, "This knife?" Then he asked if it was made from E-grade which, or. Fake replied that it was. He thought to himself that this man looked like a merchant. He must be very experienced, since he managed to sell his goods so quickly. The man smiled and said that he had been in this business for quite some time. He then added that the weapon was of such high quality that it was not immediately obvious that it was made from E-grade or. He saw that there were swords and daggers on the counter and asked for one of each. Fake thanked him and began to discuss the price. They began to bargain. Fake wanted to sell everything for 50,000, but the man was a good negotiator. In the end, MC gave in and agreed to 35,000 for everything. Then he asked for a recommendation. The man replied, "Of course." Fake realized that he had lowered the price much more than he wanted to. The man said that MC's assistant would be hard to forget. Alicia thanked him and asked if it was too conspicuous. The man replied that it wasn't, because it was actually a good thing, as there were many shops at the fair, and he had approached this stall precisely because of the mask. He was also attracted by Alicia's beautiful voice. She thanked him. The man said goodbye, saying that they would see each other again. Fake thanked him. Then he looked at Alicia and said that it was all thanks to her. Alicia replied that no, it was all thanks to him. She added that thanks to this man, they would be able to attract many new customers. Fake said yes. He would be very happy if that happened. And he counted the proceeds. He sold 2 swords and 2 knives. The total proceeds amounted to 85,000 gold. Quite a sharp jump compared to last week. A little later, in Mr. Goral's office, MC put the bag of gold on the table. Goral said that he could see that everything had gone well. But there are many other blacksmiths in the area who are capable of earning that amount. Fake replied yes. But he thought to himself that the amount wasn't really that incredible and that he still wasn't good enough. He thanked the gentleman and wanted to leave. But Goral stopped him. Fake asked what was wrong. Goral said that tomorrow a blacksmith named Lebert would come to them to propose marriage. In the future, he would inherit the title of his house and become a viscount. MC replied curtly. Goral looked out the window. Fake thought that Lebert was one of the suitors for Alicia's hand. But she said that such society weighed heavily on her. So, does that mean Lebert is coming because MC is not doing his job well enough? Goral said that Lebert was a very ambitious man. Fake replied yes. Goral added that Lebert was young and had a high libido. MC was surprised. He didn't understand what the gentleman meant. And Goro repeated once again, a man with a high libido. MC thought that he didn't want the gentleman to repeat it again with such a straight face, because he was already barely holding back his laughter. Goro said that his daughter was very cute. Fake said yes, but he wondered why he said that, because Alicia was really beautiful. Goro said that Lebert had told him that he was interested in Alicia. However, Alicia was not impressed by his persistence. Goro always thought that Alicia didn't like men like that, and it turned out he was right. Nevertheless, they should not show Lebert even a shred of disrespect, because he also has his sights set on Alicia's heart. At that moment, Fake thought that his talents were not enough to impress Goro, so it was not surprising that other candidates for Alicia's hand would appear. Goro said that Lebert could come across as insincere, and he was worried that Alicia would be unhappy with him. Fake was better in that regard. MC thanked him for his words, but he thought to himself that he didn't look like a womanizer in Goro's eyes. But that's how it is. He really has no experience with girls. Goro asked him not to read too much into it, because he hadn't accepted Fake yet. However, he was simply looking for a happy medium between satisfying his demands and ensuring his daughter's happiness. Fake thought that Goro was a wonderful father. He said he wouldn't let him down. Goro asked him to try his best. Fake understood that Goro's aristocratic status obliged him to think about a profitable match, but he sincerely cared about his daughter's happiness. MC was very upset that Mr. Goro loved his daughter so much, and he was deceiving him. After all, Goro had high expectations of him and looked after him, and he was acting disrespectfully. But in any case, in order to maintain his position, he needed to improve his craft. He went into his room, thinking about how difficult everything was. Alicia was waiting for him there. She asked if her father had accepted him. Fake replied that he had not, that he was not satisfied with his sales figures. Alicia responded that they had tried their best. MC looked at her and smelled the scent of soap, and her hair was still damp. He couldn't believe she had come to him after the bathroom. He noticed that she was dressed a little more lightly than usual, but he thought she should be more careful about such things because she was one of the most beautiful and noble girls in the world. Fake thought that Mr. Goro was worried about the same thing. MC asked himself not to think about anything vulgar. At the moment, he could only trade once a week. To appear at the market more often, he needed to open his own store as soon as possible. But even then, there wouldn't be more customers, so he first needed to make a name for himself in business circles. Alicia said he was right. Running his own shop was quite expensive, so he first needed to acquire regular customers. Fake thought that he still had a lot to do. But since it was for Alicia's sake, if he couldn't handle the cover role, another candidate would appear, just like now. He informed her of Lebert's arrival. Alicia replied that she knew and sadly accepted the fact that she would not be able to avoid meeting Lebert. Fake responded with an apology. Pretending to be her fiancé, he was supposed to prevent other candidates from appearing, but he failed. Alicia asked him not to worry about it. She said that she would feel uncomfortable talking to Lebert and asked if they could meet with Fake afterwards. He replied that of course they could and suggested that she come to the workshop at any time. MC really wanted to stay with her, but Mr. Goro would consider it disrespectful to Lebert. Alicia thanked him. Then she said that he was acting a little differently than usual. She asked if something had happened. Fake couldn't understand what she meant, although when he thought about it, she had been sitting like that for quite a long time. And when she moved, he could see her breast because her dress was open and her shoulders were bare. He asked what she meant. Fake couldn't understand what she wanted to hear. That she dressed so seductively to test him? Alicia said she had heard that if she dressed like that, men would fall in love with her. Fake asked who told her that. She replied, Leffy. MC understood everything. He thought they wanted to hear his opinion so they could use it on other suitors. MC replied that if he were married to her, they already would be. Alicia asked what they would do. Fake waved his hand and said nothing. Alicia asked him if he was in love. Fake replied that he believed that, in general, men would definitely fall in love with her. Alicia said she understood. Then she asked if he liked her. Fake asked, huh? Alicia put her hand on her chest and said that nature had not blessed her with much in that area. She asked if that was a problem for him. Fake was offended by the question. Alicia asked what size girls he liked best. MC asked her to stop with such questions. Alicia asked what he thought about her breast size. Fake couldn't understand why she was treating him this way. Meanwhile, in Mr. Morgan's office, they were discussing the fact that he had become the personal blacksmith of the Knight Commander. In that case, the position of Master Blacksmith would soon become vacant. One of the workers spoke up and asked the others if they would apply for the job. Morgan thought about how today the Knight Commander would evaluate the charms he had placed on his sword. He was curious to know what reward he would receive for this. He assumed that it would be at least the position of personal blacksmith to the Knight Commander. He heard the door creak. The knight entered the office. Morgan greeted him, and said that they hadn't seen each other in a long time. Morgan was thinking about how he could get him to offer him a promotion sooner. The knight asked where Fake was. Morgan froze in silence, and he thought again about Fake. Then he replied that Fake was still expected to return. The knight said he wanted to talk about the sword he had entrusted to him. Morgan said that he had cast a spell on the sword. The knight asked what? Morgan explained that Fake was currently on vacation, so he had taken over some of his duties. The knight said, "So that's it. Now everything is clear." Morgan was embarrassed and asked what he would say. The knight swung his sword, and a small amount of hair from Morgan's head fell to the floor. The workers watched as the sword cracked. A metal plate fell to the floor. The knight put the remaining stump of the sword to Morgan's neck and said that it was a complete failure. Morgan asked in horror what he meant. The knight said that he had asked his personal blacksmith to look at the spell. The blacksmith said that he had never seen such a mediocre piece of work. The knight shouted that if the sword was used at full strength, it would crumble to pieces. He no longer wishes to deal with such an incompetent person, and he gave clear instructions that Fake should do the job. The knight asked where Fake was. Where was he spending his vacation? Morgan was very scared. It was the first time in his life that someone had shouted at him like that. Usually, at the mere mention of his father's name, one of the most influential people in the country, people would fall to their knees before him. One of the workers said that Fake no longer worked there. The knight asked why. After all, he was so talented that even his blacksmith wanted to meet him. Morgan wondered if Fake was really talented. It was impossible. His work couldn't be that bad. Morgan said that Fake had left the job of his own accord. The knight asked if he had resigned. Morgan replied yes and apologized for the quality of the sword. The knight replied, "That's right," and asked if they knew where he had gone. Morgan remembered Alicia and replied no. The knight said clearly that now he understood everything, and since then, they have not fulfilled a single order. He asked them to get their act together and cast the spells properly and supply the knights with weapons. Otherwise, they would have nothing to fight with. Morgan said that was the problem, but he himself thought that the knights would soon have nothing to fight with. They hoped to quit their jobs at Fake, and he wondered why he wasn't coming back. The knight shouted, "What are you standing there for? Wasn't I clear?" The workers trembled and replied that it was perfectly clear they would get to work immediately. The knight asked them to contact him as soon as they found out where Fake was. Then he left, slamming the door behind him. Morgan wondered why Fake was so in demand. One of the workers approached him and asked what they should do with so many swords. And not just these, because every day they received more and more weapons. Morgan glanced at them and shouted, "Get to work." He thought it was all because of that incompetent Fake. They urgently needed to find a way to get the job done on time. The knight thought that something was wrong with the court blacksmiths, and he could sense it. He went to his blacksmith, who turned to him and said that there was something to pay attention to. The knight asked what was wrong. The blacksmith said it was about the batch of swords they had recently received. The knight said that he had sent these swords to the forge to have their enchantments renewed as a matter of priority. The blacksmith said that they had not supplied them with new weapons for some time. They had been trying to make do with what they had, but the spells were gradually wearing off. But it seems that the new shipment only partially solves the problem, as the quality of the spells is too low. The knight asked what he said. Then he said that he had to check the magic code. The blacksmith replied, "Of course," and asked if everything would be all right. After all, last time he felt very ill after checking it. The knight replied correctly and said that this time he would be more careful. His abilities were not sufficient to see the magic code of the spells cast by Fake. After all, attempting to read spells that were beyond his level caused significant discomfort in his body. And even if he persisted, he would not be able to read such spells. Fake's attempt to read the magic spells turned him inside out several times. This meant that Fake's level was significantly higher than that of the knight. But this time, the spells were cast by other people, albeit court blacksmiths. Therefore, if we don't take Morgan into account, they're the best blacksmiths in the country, and their work should smear him across the wall. The knight was surprised by what he saw, because this work looks like childish scribbles, and spells of this quality will destroy the sword from within. He asked if the blacksmith had already given these swords to anyone. He replied that he also thought these swords were terrible, and so he asked the knight to take a look. The knight replied that it was the right decision because it was impossible to work with these swords. And this nonsense will only ruin sword. And then we'll have to rewrite the entire magic code from scratch. The knight did not expect those people to do their job so badly, because they were supposed to be the best in the country. He asked if there were any quality swords left. The blacksmith replied that there were a few, but not enough to fulfill the plan to wipe out the monsters. The knight said that in that case, priority would be given to recruits who could not yet afford their own swords. He asked that they be instructed not to overuse them. The blacksmith replied that he understood. The knight said he needed to talk to another blacksmith who had worked on his sword. The blacksmith asked who this person was. The knight replied that his name was Mr. Figure and that he had once made his sword. He was a man with a difficult character. He doubted that he would agree to a simple enchantment, but at the moment he could only rely on him in this matter, and it was necessary to try. He was furious with those incompetent blacksmiths and said that he would initiate an internal investigation later. In addition, he needs to find out where Fake is now. The royal court is a huge private sector where shady deals are always made, many decisions are made behind the scenes, and newcomers are treated quite harshly during their training. The knight has no doubt that there is much more going on in the shadows than he can imagine. He thought about the supply of premium quality swords over the last couple of years, and he asked himself, could it be that all of this was made by Fake? And if so, then even to him, an ignorant man, his rare talent is obvious. How many other blacksmiths in the country could provide such an incredible ratio of quantity and quality? The knight said that Fake's departure would set the knight's progress back 50 years. The blacksmith asked, The knight thought that the court blacksmiths and this Morgan were definitely hiding something. Meanwhile, Lebert arrived at the estate. MC watched him from the window. He noticed that Lebert was a rather handsome man, and he even felt jealous and couldn't do anything about it. Lebert was also a young man with a high libido, as Goral said. MC wondered whether he should greet Robert, but then he thought that Robert was also a contender, so he might inadvertently provoke him. It seemed best to spend the day in the workshop, but the meeting was not long in coming. Alicia apologized to him and said that Lebert insisted on meeting him at least once. Lebert said this, so that was Alicia's fiancé. MC introduced himself. Lebert responded in kind. They shook hands, and Lebert took Fake by the hand and began to examine him. Fake didn't understand what was happening. Lebert said that everything was fine, he just thought he had such beautiful hands. Charmingly strong, with thick, firm skin. He looked over Fake's shoulder and asked Alicia if she always hid behind someone else's shoulder. After all, they hadn't seen each other for a long time. In that time, she was also standing behind the maid's shoulder when they were discussing books in the garden, and even felt a little hurt. Alicia apologized. Lebert looked at her and was overcome with horror. Fake wondered what would happen next. Lebert said that Alicia had grown up so much. She asked, really? Lebert asked if Fake liked it here. MC thought it was a very sudden question and tried to answer, but Alicia pulled him by the sleeve. Fake was very awkward, and it seemed that Alicia was also unaccustomed to such conversations. But they couldn't let Lebert guess about their fake relationship. Besides, he had no right to lose to this man, regardless of whether she loved him or not. Fake said that he loved Alicia and was simply crazy about her. Lebert smiled and said clearly. He asked Alicia to talk to Fake alone. They went to the workshop. Lebert saw a rack with swords and asked permission to take a look. Fake said sure, and he thought that Lebert was checking out his work. He figured Lebert was a talented blacksmith, and that's why he was also a candidate. Lebert asked, magic, all right? And he said it was a good sword. Fake thanked him, and then he said that this sword was forged from magic ore. Lebert replied clearly and said that Fake was quite good and that the final spells were cast so skillfully. Lebert put the sword back in its place. He said that sometimes he could talk nonsense and asked not to pay attention to it. Fake asked what he meant. Lebert picked up a knife and, running it across the table, replied that it was nonsense. He said that he was not particularly gifted as a blacksmith, nor did he have any particular interest in it. He tossed the knife in his hand and said that compared to other blacksmiths, he considered himself to be somewhere in the middle. That's why he was like an aristocrat here. Fake asked what he meant by that. Lebert replied that Lady Alicia was a very attractive girl, and many men would like to see her as their bride. She is as beautiful as a delicate flower. However, unfortunately, she is growing up. Fake spread his arms and said that Alicia was only 18 and asked if he was aware of that. Lebert replied that she used to be like that. A little girl, so small that it seemed she would break in two if you hugged her. Fake didn't understand what he meant. Lebert shouted that she had grown up. He looked up at the sky and said that Lady Alicia was a beautiful young lady, but that wasn't enough. He liked younger girls. And if Alicia were 20 centimeters shorter and had smaller breasts. But her current appearance did not excite him at all, and now the size of her breasts was barely tolerable. Fake had no idea what he was talking about. He wondered if Alicia's measurements perfectly reflected her sophistication. Then he stopped himself from such thoughts and asked Lebert what he was getting at. Lebert replied that he no longer felt the same passion for her. Fake replied that he understood and asked if he was really not interested. Lebert replied that he believed so. First of all, he had no burning ambition to become an aristocrat. He hoped to achieve more as an independent warrior and aimed higher than. It seems to him that the Burnist family wants a blacksmith for his son-in-law, but he prefers hunting monsters. Be that as it may, due to family circumstances, he needs to maintain the appearance of all this. Therefore, He wished Fake luck and hopes that he will keep their conversation a secret from the Burnous family. Fake replied that he understood. Lebert said that was wonderful. Then he said that he liked that sword. He asked if it was possible to buy it. Fake replied, of course. Robert asked, what's the price? Fake understood that this sword was of higher quality than the one he had recently sold to Ivis, and the hilt had more decorations. He wondered if he should ask for more, and then he offered a price of 10,000 gold. Lebert agreed to the offer. He took out a box. MC thought that he had asked for a rather high price, but Lebert was an aristocrat. Fake noticed the inventory box in his hands and was surprised. After all, each such box could hold a certain number of items and cost as much as a commoner's annual income. Lebert handed over the bag of money and asked him to check it. Fake thanked him. Lebert asked him once again to remember his request. Fake replied that he would, of course. Then Lebert added that he might bring weapons in the future and would be grateful if Fake could work with them. Fake replied that in that case, he would wait. Lebert said okay and asked to drop the formalities. After all, he wanted to be friends. Lebert looked him in the eyes and asked him to take care of him from now on. Fake called out to him. Lebert replied yes, and MC said that he was too close to his face. Leaving the workshop, Lebert turned to Alicia and showed her the sword that Fake had made. Alicia asked if that was what he wanted. Lebert replied yes, and said that he also needed to talk to Fake. He then added that Fake was a very talented blacksmith, so he decided to purchase the sword as a sample. Lebert said goodbye and expressed his hope that they would stay in touch in the future. Fake reciprocated. Lebert wished her well and told Alicia that he would visit her again. MC exhaled and said that they had done it. Alicia praised him for today. Fake said that she had done a great job too. Then he asked if there would be others besides Lebert. She said yes. Fake said he understood, so there would be many more such cases. But Lebert turned out to be surprisingly good, but no one knows what the future holds. In any case, he needs to work harder, including for Alicia's sake. After all, peace is not eternal. Thanks for watching. Write your feedback in the comments. If you like the story, please like and subscribe. See you soon.